On a dirt road near La Fraye in March 1815, a lone man in a gray overcoat steps forward to face a battalion of leveled muskets. A fugitive, recently escaped from island exile, he unbuttons his coat, daring them to shoot their emperor. Instead of firing, the men of the 5th Regiment lower their weapons. The tense silence breaks into weeping and deafening cheers. It is a display of magnetic loyalty that allowed him to reclaim an empire without firing a single shot. To understand how Napoleon Bonaparte commanded such devotion, we have to look to his beginnings. Born in 1769, his life began on the rugged, isolated fringes of a dying kingdom, just 1 year after the Republic of Genoa ceded his native Corsica to France. At age 9, he was sent to the French mainland to attend the military academy at Brienne-le-Château. Speaking heavily accented French, he faced severe cultural and linguistic isolation, making him a prime target for relentless bullying by his aristocratic peers. This hostile environment drove the young cadet inward. He retreated into books, developing an obsessive devotion to classical history, geography, and the precise, predictable rules of mathematics. This focus on mathematics turned the social chaos of his school years into a series of problems to be solved. When the French Revolution eventually swept away the old aristocratic hierarchies that had marginalized him, it created a vacuum where a man who viewed war as a problem of geometry and power as a cold calculation could rise on merit alone. That intellect found its first major test at the Siege of Toulon in 1793. By mathematically calculating the exact placement for his artillery, he directed red-hot shot into the British fleet anchored below, forcing their evacuation and bringing the 24-year-old commander national fame. 2 years later, tasked with defending the revolutionary legislature in Paris, he turned his cannons directly onto royalist insurgents. This ruthless, calculated clearance of the city streets, famously remembered as a whiff of grape shot, proved him to be the indispensable sword of the Republic. After executing a lightning-fast, victorious campaign in Italy, Napoleon capitalized on a weary, exhausted French public. In November 1799, he leveraged military force in the coup of 18 Brumaire, dissolving the chaotic government and seizing absolute executive power as first consul. He immediately set out to restore order through intense centralization. He established a top-down prefecture system and created the Bank of France, building a highly efficient administrative machine designed specifically to extract taxes and enforce mass military conscription. His most enduring domestic achievement was the Civil Code of 1804. It swept away a fragmented patchwork of local customary laws, replacing them with a single, standardized legal architecture for the entire nation. The code was deeply contradictory. It guaranteed legal equality for all citizens and abolished feudal privileges, yet it also reinforced absolute patriarchal authority, severely restricting women's rights to divorce, property ownership, and independent financial transactions. The culmination of his domestic ascent came in December 1804. In a display of supreme confidence, he took the crown from the Pope's hands and placed it on his own head. The Republic was dead. The French Empire had begun. By trading democratic liberty for institutional efficiency, Napoleon built a modernized state machine designed expressly for permanent, centralized expansion. His expansion reached its tactical peak in December 1805 at Austerlitz. Napoleon deliberately weakened his right flank, baiting Austro-Russian forces to abandon the vital Pratzen Heights. As they committed, the trap snapped shut. Hidden French divisions emerged, cleanly splitting the enemy army in two. This crushing victory shattered the coalition. It led directly to the treaties of Tilsit, where Napoleon and the Russian Tsar met on a raft in the Niemen River to effectively carve up continental Europe between them. Austerlitz proved that the French army could move faster and hit harder than any other force by concentrating overwhelming power on a single decisive point. But as the empire expanded, the sheer scale of the continent began to outpace even Napoleon's ability to personally direct every move. Internal fractures began to weaken his command structure. The elite generals he relied upon to run his armies, known as the Marshalate, were plagued by intense, bitter rivalries and petty jealousies that severely hampered their coordination. His personal life also destabilized the empire. Driven by an obsessive need to secure a dynastic bloodline, he coldly divorced his beloved wife Joséphine when she proved unable to produce a male heir. Attempting to economically choke Great Britain, he launched the Continental System, forbidding European trade with the British. This policy backfired violently when he invaded his own ally, dragging France into the Spanish Ulcer, a brutal guerrilla war that pinned down and bled hundreds of thousands of French troops. His absolute refusal to tolerate any neutral trade violations ultimately led to his fatal decision in 1812. He invaded Russia with over 500,000 men, stretching his supply lines far past their breaking point. The retreat from a burning Moscow was a horrifying ordeal. The veteran corps of the Grande Armée was systematically destroyed, not by pitched battle, but by starvation, disease, and extreme winter cold. The traits that fueled his rise, insatiable ambition, rapid movement, and hyper-centralized control, had finally pushed his empire beyond its structural breaking point. Forced to rebuild his forces in 1813, Napoleon executed a desperate mobilization in Germany. He fielded a massive new army composed largely of raw young conscripts, severely lacking the veteran cavalry required to exploit victories. Exhausted and short on supplies, he agreed to the Clausewitz Armistice. It was a fatal strategic error. The pause bought his enemies the time they needed to secure British funding and unite into a massive, cohesive coalition against him. The result was the catastrophic Battle of Leipzig. Surrounded by vastly superior numbers, the French army was doomed by the premature destruction of the Elster River Bridge, trapping tens of thousands of soldiers and shattering French power in Germany. Falling back to French soil in 1814, Napoleon orchestrated a brilliant but ultimately futile defensive campaign. He rapidly struck separated coalition columns, inflicting heavy losses, but sheer numbers eventually forced the fall of Paris. Refusing to fight on, his own marshals demanded his abdication. The era of lightning victories was over. His enemies had studied his operational methods and weaponized a massive scale of a united Europe against him. After 9 months of exile on the island of Elba, he executed a daring escape. Reclaiming his empire without shedding a drop of blood, he triggered the desperate campaign known as the 100 Days. His final gamble ended at Waterloo. Driven by tactical miscalculations on muddy terrain and the lethal flanking arrival of the Prussian army, the French lines broke, permanently ending his military reign. Following his second abdication, the British government exiled him as a prisoner of war to the remote volcanic rock of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, ensuring his military threat was extinguished for good. Yet his true, lasting victory lay in the civilian sphere. The systems he violently exported across the continent, the civil code, secular governance, and state meritocracy, remained deeply embedded in the very nations that had united to defeat him. Napoleon's insatiable military ambition guaranteed his ultimate destruction, but the administrative architecture he left behind permanently dismantled European feudalism, providing the blueprint for the modern state.